Today we're going to take a look at a build of Lord Windgrace. This is a Jund commander. Its goal is around landfall, so we're going to talk about ways that we have to replay our lands and get a bunch of triggers and do things with them. Lord Windgrace costs green, red, black, and 2 generic to cast for legendary planeswalker. We can +2 Lord Windgrace to discard a card, then draw a card. If a land card was discarded this way, we draw an additional card. -3, return up to 2 target land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. -11, destroy up to 6 target non-land permanents, and then we create 6 2/2 Cat Warrior creature tokens with Forest Walk. We run 2 other planeswalkers in the deck. We're running Renin 6 for a green and a red. Its +1 allows us to return up to 1 target land card from our graveyard to our hand. It's -1, Renin 6 deals 1 damage to any target. And then -7, we get an emblem that with instant and sorcery spells in our graveyard have retrace. It's not really here for that, it's mainly here for the +1. We also are running Renin 7, who costs significantly more. Renin 7 costs 2 green and 3 generic. It's +1, we reveal the top 4 cards of our library, we put all land cards revealed this way into our hand, and then the rest in our graveyard. It's 0 ability, we can put any number of land cards from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. It's -3, create a green tree folk creature token with reach. This creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control, and it's -8, return all permanent cards from our graveyard to our hand, and we get an emblem that we have no maximum hand size. We do run 27 creatures, a lot of them synergize around landfall, getting extra lands, or being able to do things with our lands. We run Lotus Cobra, who has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we make a mana of any color. Sakura Tribe Elder, we can sacrifice it, search for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. Azusa, Lost But Seeking, allows us to play 2 additional lands. Courser of Crufix for a generic and 2 green, lets us play with the top card of our library revealed. We may play the top card of our library if it's a land card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain a life. Dryad of the Elysian Grove allows us to play an additional land, and then our lands are every basic land type. Runninap Excavator allows us to play land cards from our graveyard. Reclamation Sage isn't really here for any landfall abilities, but it is a good removal card for us. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Scute Swarm can get pretty nasty. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 1/1 green insect creature token, and then if we control 6 or more lands, we end up creating a copy of Scute Swarm instead, which 6 or more lands is going to be pretty easy, so we're going to end up making lots of Scute Swarms. Tireless Tracker has whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we investigate, which means we create a clue. Whenever we sacrifice a clue, we put a +1/+1 counter on it. Tunneling Geopede is a way for us to start pinging our opponents, because whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, Tunneling Geopede is going to do 1 damage to each opponent. Likely we're going to be playing 2 or 3 lands per turn, so that's going to really add up to a lot of damage over the course of the game very quickly. Wayward Swordtooth has Ascend, which means if we control 10 or more permanents, we have the City's Blessing, which likely is to happen very quickly. We may play additional land on each of our turns, and then Wayward Swordtooth can't attack or block unless we have the City's Blessing, which again is very easy for us to be able to do with all of our lands, just doing land things. Mina and Den Wildborn, we may play an additional land on each of our turns, and then for a red and a green, we can return a land we control to its owner's hand, and then target creature gains trample. Oracle of Moldiah allows us to play an additional land every turn. It allows us to play with the top card of our library revealed, and we may play lands from the top of it. Spitfire Logic, whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So just like Tunneling Geopede, this is going to add up very quickly as we're playing 2-3 lands a turn. World Shaper, whenever World Shaper attacks, we may put the top 3 cards of our library in our graveyard, and then when it dies, we put all land cards from our graveyard on the battlefield tapped. Ashaya has a lot going for us in this deck because it's going to be a very big creature. Its Power and toughness is equal to the number of lands we control, but then Ashaya makes all non-token creatures forest lands. So for all of our creatures, then we are also going to count those as lands, which means Ashaya is going to be pretty chunky. Greensleeve's Morrow Sorcerer has protection from planeswalkers and wizards, which that part's not super relevant. But what is Greensleeve's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 3/3 green badger creature token. Titania, Protector of Argoth, says that when Titania enters the battlefield, return target land card from our graveyard to the battlefield, and when a land is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. Xenagos doesn't have a ton to deal with lands. However, it's not a creature unless it has more than 7 devotion, which means that we have to have 7 or more red and or green pips among cards that are on the battlefield. So very likely it's not going to be a creature. But also at the beginning of our combat on our turn, another creature we control gains +X/+X, whereas it's that creature's power. So something like Ashaya, which could be a 10/10, we could give it another 10 and do a lot of damage. Ancient Green Warden has reach. We may play lands from our graveyard, and then if a land enters the battlefield causes the triggered ability of a permanent to control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So things like the Spitfire Logic, Tunneling Geopede, any of our abilities, being able to trigger an additional time could be pretty powerful for us. Geode Rager has first strike, and then of course when a land enters the battlefield, we're going to goad each creature target player controls. So if we can play 3 lands in a turn and have this out, we're going to goad all of the creatures our opponents have, which will ensure they have to attack each other, but not us. Morog, Fury of Akum. Each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each time it attacked this turn, and when a land enters the battlefield under our control, if it's during our main phase, then there will be an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, we untap all creatures we control, so potentially doing 2, maybe 3 combats in a turn because of Morag and our lands entering. Multani Yavamaya's Avatar has Reach and Trample, and it gets +1/+1 for each land that we control and each land card in our graveyard. We can pay a green and 1 generic to return 2 lands we control to their owner's hand, and then we return Multani from the graveyard to our hand, which is good because we want to be able to get this bad boy out, especially since it has Trample. Rampaging Balos has Trample, and then of course Landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Uvelinwald Hydra has Reach, and then its power and toughness is equal to the number of lands we control, and when it enters the battlefield, we may search for a land card and put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. Of course, we're going to run Avenger of Zendikar. Any landfall deck does. Duh. And it enters the battlefield. We create a number of plant tokens equal to the number of lands that we control. And then when a land enters the battlefield, we put +1/+1 on each plant. We do run Omnath Locus of Rage to be able to create a 5/5 elemental when lands enter the battlefield. And when Omnath or another elemental dies, we do 3 damage to any target. Sorceries are a lot of ramp because the whole point of this deck is to be able to play as many lands as we can and really be able to have an advantage from that. So you'll notice things like Farseek and whatnot. We run Finale of Devastation because things like Finale, if we Finale for a pretty big Avenger or Omnath, this is going to be pretty powerful for us and potentially be a way to kill things. Scape Shift, lots of damage going to happen. We sacrifice all lands, we go get many more, and then we have plenty of ways to get them back out of our graveyard, so we're not super worried about that. Splendid Reclamation, returning all of our land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. Again, we're not super worried about our lands, but that's going to allow us to do a lot of damage. Triumph of the Hordes is a way potentially to close it out and win the game by giving our creatures +1/+1 trample and infect. Overwhelming Stampede, another way to hopefully power through and win the game. And Blasphemous Act if we really need to wipe the board. Instance, we run Removal and Ramp, of course. So you're seeing things like Crop Rotation. You're seeing ways to remove the things like Nature's Claim, Beast Within, whatnots. Artifacts are extremely light because we have plenty of ways to ramp land, so we don't care about all the artifact ramp. But we do run Crucible of Worlds to play land cards from our graveyard, and Conduit of Worlds to do the same thing. Enchantments all revolve around lands. Of course, we run Exploration to be able to play an additional land on our turn. Kalani's Hard Expedition is going to allow us to search for some things possibly, and Zendikar's Royal is a way to make some creatures, some 2/2 elementals when things enter the battlefield. Because we are a landfall deck, you'll notice we have lots of lands. We run things like Fable Passage, of course. We run Field of the Dead because with a bunch of lands entering, we should be able to make some zombies. We run things like Lotus Field because it's going to put some lands in our graveyard that we can then get back. We also are running one of each snowland in our color because of Field of the Dead. Even though this is a basic snowland forest, it does not matter. It is a different land. It is not the same thing as playing a basic forest. So for purposes like Field of the Dead that require 7 different lands, a regular forest and a snow-covered forest are 2 different lands. We are running Valakut because with Valakut and our Dryad of the Eastern Grove, this makes all of our lands different land types, which would allow things to trigger from Valakut from our lands entering and as a way to do some damage. Vesuva allows us to copy a land, so we could copy the Valakut to be able to really get a bunch of lands in. So those of you that play Modern and play Amulet Titan, you're very familiar with the whole Valakut Vesuva combo piece with Dryad of the Elysian Grove. But we can also copy Field of the Dead if we want to really power through and get a bunch of lands that enter, and then boom, we have a whole bunch of zombies that are going to attack people. If you have experience playing Lord Windgrace, if there are other cards that we did not include, please let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear recommendations of things that we didn't think of, but we would also love to hear how the deck has functioned for you and how it's worked out in your play group. So please let us know those things in the comments below.